Hey everyone, welcome to the Prospect Weekly Roundup. Dave Dan here. Welcome from a muggy Washington, D.C. I happen to be in town because we did a couple things this week. We had a board meeting, but we had a launch party for our pricing issue, how pricing really works, prospect.org/pricing. And it was a great event. Thank you to everyone. If you're on the chat right now and you came out, thank you for doing that. And we had a really good time. It's been great to see the response to this issue, which we put a lot of time and effort into. And today on the show, I have someone who put just that level of time and effort into it. He also is a Prospect alumni, our former writing fellow, who is now a reporter with a great investigative news site called the Capitol Forum, and we'll talk about that in a little bit with him. But Jared Facundo, welcome to the Weekly Roundup.
It's so awesome to be on. You guys weren't doing this when I was still around, so it's cool.
That's right. I had to get you in at some point to give you the flavor of the Roundup. We like to rotate it among our staff and even our former staff. So thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. The reason you're here is that you contributed one of my favorite articles for the pricing issue. And it's really about the area where a lot of these pricing strategies that we write about in the issue come together, whether it's junk fees, and we can talk about the fee part of this, whether it's surge or dynamic pricing, whether it's increasing price personalization, which grocery stores actually kind of were trailblazers in that respect. A whole bunch of different, and even price fixing as well, and we can talk about that too. Whole bunch of different strategies come together in the grocery store, and that's why it's not surprising that although grocery pricing has been muted recently, since the beginning of the pandemic, it has gone up something like 25%, which is higher than normal inflation. So I guess, I mean, I almost don't know where to begin, but the first thing, let's just talk about how, grocery stores really are expressions of abundance. You go into a grocery store and it looks like the whole world is opened up to you in a way that's very rare in human history, that you have all of these options and all of these choices, and they're not just local. They're not just what grows in your area, but it's stuff from all over the world. But could you talk about how that's a bit of an illusion, that this idea of choice, that you, because of the abundance of capitalism, have this ability to choose whatever you want, isn't exactly as robust as you really think if you really dig in.
Definitely. I think the expression of abundance is like a good way to frame the underbelly of a grocery store, I suppose. And the really critical part of this is that everything you see inside of a grocery store, whether that's the placement of the different cereal options down that aisle, or it is the number of like in-house brands being offered, whether that's like Walmart, Whole Foods, Kroger, you name it, like that. In order to make it to the grocery shelf, there was a really long supply chain process that it took to make it there. And every single notch of that process, there's cases of like anti-competitive conduct that take place in order to make it to the next level. And by the time it makes it to the grocery shelf for consumers, for you and I, that's where we see the steepest like price jump on it. So I like let's break down. Let's break down.
Because what you're saying, so what you're saying is nothing in a grocery store is there by accident. Right. Every piece of space you can almost view as a little city. If you want to get your little house, if you want to get your house in a good neighborhood, you're going to have to pay for it. And if you aren't willing as much to pay for it, your house, which is where your products are located, are going to be in the worst neighborhood in the grocery store, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's like a turf war of sorts
Yeah.
for the space in there. And the funny thing about it too is that all the options that you think you have inside the grocery store, like they really go back to like Pepsi, Coca-Cola,
Hmm.
Mondelez, and sometimes I mean like a company like Pepsi, you would think that okay, it's going to be a dominant player in drinks. Like basically that's why people ask Coke or Pepsi, but they're also in snacks. And it
Right.
was after the writing process I found out that Pepsi also owns, I believe, Pizza Hut. So it's like even outside of groceries, like they
Right.
not just like the food inside there, but it's everything, and you
In
can
other
just
words,
break it
so
down and buy.
if you were walking down the aisle and you think, wow, there are like 20 types of peanut butter here, the truth is there may be two.
Yes.
Same with dishwashing liquid, the same with basically every product that you have. There are large conglomerated food companies, whether it's Frito-Lay, which is part of Pepsi, whether it's Unilever, which does a ton of different products, whether it's ConAgra, General Mills, Post, Kellogg's. They're about, a handful of between 10, 15, 20 different conglomerates that dominate the grocery store, and they really specialize in different parts of the grocery store. So if you're talking about cereal, it's not that there are 15 or 20 companies looking for your cereal dollar. It's like two. And it's very hard to break into that market. So maybe at this point we should tell the story of Snoop cereal, which is one of my favorite stories in this article, about this attempt to sort of break this duopoly in cereal between Kellogg's and Post, and what ended up happening. So tell us about Snoop cereal.
Yeah, Snoop cereal. It was a I don't know exactly when Snoop cereal was supposed to hit grocery shelves, but there was a lawsuit filed earlier this year from Brodus Foods, which is a company that Snoop Dogg and Master P used to distribute their cereal, Snoop cereal. And this
Got it.
lawsuit is against Walmart and Post. And the basic architecture of the lawsuit is that they wanted to that Snoop Dogg wanted to enter like a marketing partnership of sorts with Post to
And
promote.
let's start there and just break that down, because so he has an idea for a cereal, right? And
Yeah,
it's a little bit fun, and it's trading on the Snoop brand, and I don't think there's pot in the cereal, but it's Snoop related, right?
yeah, it's like putting
And
a athlete on a
exactly,
cereal box.
which is a good idea, right? You're using existing brand loyalty to Snoop Dogg, and trying to use that. But he sees that there are gatekeepers. That if you really want to get a cereal into a mass market kind of situation, not just sell it on the internet or something, that you're going to have to pay off Post, and you're going to have to pay off Walmart or other retailers. Post is going to fight you if you try to get into the store, because that's encroaching on their turf. Walmart is going to erect a toll booth if you want to get into their store. Maybe before we get going with the Snoop Dogg cereal, we should talk about this concept of slotting fees. The fact that that grocery stores are really toll takers.
Yeah, that's probably one of the things that's like hidden most from consumers. The fact that every like supplier has to essentially buy a ticket in order to get access to the store shelf. And uh,
Right.
could we tease it out a little bit more? What part of the slotting fee
Right.
were
I
you talking?
mean, so we're talking about slotting fees, just as you said.
Yeah,
There is a cost to getting onto a grocery store shelf, and that cost varies depending on where on the shelf you want to be. An end cap is seen as a prime real estate in the grocery store. You're at the end of the aisle as everybody's turning around or as they're just walking down the aisle, they can see the end cap. And so that's a prime place to be. You're gonna have to pay more for that. If you're at
Yeah,
eye level, you're gonna have to pay more than if you're way up top or way down below.
I
So
think a way
so
for us to like understand the slotting fees like outside of like the grocery specific context, it's like a form of purchasing marketing inside the store. Like
yeah,
that's
that's
it.
right.
It's essentially buying access to the consumer's eyeballs. But
the,
that's
the very presence of the product is the marketing itself, right? Because there's information on the box, there's bright display of what the thing is, and if you get that exactly at eye level, so as you're walking down the aisle with your shopping cart, you immediately see that. That is the way that you're going to get more interest and attraction to your products. And so that's you're going to pay for that. And I don't think people understand that. And that marketing fee, I know you talked to someone who was with Whole Foods, I believe, for a long time, for like 25 years, and he gave a number, right, of how much money food companies are spending on those slotting fees, on this marketing,
right.
kind of in-store marketing.
Right. The person we're referring to, his name is Errol Schweizer, and he was like the vice president of Whole Foods, like grocery division. I want to say he leaves Whole Foods. He was there for like 10, 15 or so years. And he leaves like shortly after, just right before Whole Foods is like purchased by Amazon. And
Uh-huh.
once he leaves, like today he works as like a consultant for food startups and like helps them navigate how to get to market. And he was like saying that when he was working at Whole Foods, between your retail or between your marketing and your slotting fees and all the other fees that you're paying to different actors across the supply chain, you're looking at like 25 to 30%.
Right.
That's
Wow.
just to get there. And like notoriously, there's not a high margin on making food.
Right. So that 25 and 30% is passed on to the customer.
Yeah,
So this toll booth kind of pay to play kind of scenario is a cost that's borne by customers and to the benefit of the Walmarts of the world. Now, there's another thing that we actually didn't even mention in the story, I don't think, which are called category captains.
right,
And category captains are basically the grocery stores outsource some of this slotting fee management, managing where things go on the store shelves, and they outsource it to the giant food companies. So they might say, Walmart might say to Unilever, okay, could you do aisle 7? Like, could
mhm,
you do the aisle that has ice cream in it, right? And Unilever, one of the Unilever products is Ben and Jerry's, so for example. So let's say they say, hey, Walmart, or hey, Unilever, you deal with Walmart's ice cream aisle. And now think about it, you're Unilever, and now you're in control of that eye level, this display within the store, and you have a huge ice cream product. So where do you think the competing products are going to go? I mean, just like do the math here. Where do you think those are going to go relative to your own product? So it's a form, actually, we can relate it to something in tech of self-preferencing, where Google gives you results and the top of the results are their own products. It's not different than that. Unilever is structuring a grocery store aisle in such a way that their own products get self-preference. So then let's go back now and relate this to Snoop Dogg and Snoop cereal. So they have to deal with two things. One, getting on Walmart shelves, which is going to cost money, and two, maybe dealing with Post Foods as a category captain, or just dealing with the fact that Post Foods can outbid them for shelf space. I mean, if you have a big company, you're going to be able to spend more money on marketing in store. You're going to be able to spend more money on slotting fees, and you're going to be able to muscle out your competition, subject your competition to the Siberia of the grocery store, the
yeah,
bottom aisle, or somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So what does Snoop do? He says, okay, if I enter into a marketing relationship with Post, that calls off the dogs, right? And that means that Post isn't going to muscle me out of the store, and I can deal on a more of a level playing field with Walmart. That's what he thought anyway.
Yeah.
Tell us what really happened.
They just did not put the cereal on the shelves. Like literally
Right.
inside the internal sorting system, like your Walmart employee could not sell the cereal. And if it like they would try to scan it, and it'd be, if you've ever gone to a grocery store and tried getting something and it's like, oh, this isn't available or whatever, and
Right.
a person tells you to like, okay, just go back and go get a different one. That's what they did to Snoop cereal. And
So this cereal that was shipped to Walmart was either stored in the back room with labels on it that said, don't bring this out to the store. Or if by accident it got out to the store and you tried and you're like, hey, I like Snoop, I'll buy this cereal. You go up to the aisle, the checkout counter, and you can't actually buy it. You can't scan it.
yes,
You can't do anything.
yeah. And even after writing this, I came across an incident where it was available online, but like it was like $15-20 for like a box of cereal. Like nobody is going to buy
Right.
it.
Well, I mean, think about it. You're shipping a single box of cereal from a warehouse somewhere to an individual's home is going to be a little bit expensive if you're not Amazon and you have like a giant logistics operation. If you're Broadest Foods that doesn't, have a lot of working capital, doesn't have its own logistics network, they're going to have to like pick up the box of cereal, pack it up, put it over to UPS or the Postal Service or something like that, and then send it to your home. Uh, that's just not cost effective, right? I mean, that's why we
Right,
have
right.
grocery stores in the first place, is because you want a central repository for all this stuff so that you're not bearing the cost of sending each individual package to an individual consumer. So it's just not cost effective to do that, which means if you're locked out of the store, you're kind of locked out of having a business, right?
Right. And you should really underscore that Snoop cereal, like the reason we can talk about it today is because it's Snoop Dogg. And there's a detail in the story of, I heard from Austin Frerick, who wrote one of the books that's like mentioned in there. It's
Right,
called
right.
Barons. And when I was talking to Austin, he's telling me that, or like I asked him, like, okay, we know about the Snoop incident, but are you aware of any others? And he's like, people don't come out to talk about that. Like that's when you're getting strong armed, whether it's from the supplier end, so uh, different manufacturers we've talked about, or from like the buyer end,
Mm-hmm.
you don't speak out because that is just going. It's a really small industry, and you speak out, and you are going to burn any bridges you might have had in the future. So you kind of just
Right.
take it and you move on to the next venture.
You'll get crushed. It's only because Snoop, after this situation happened, filed a lawsuit. And Ben Crump, the very famous
Yeah,
attorney who did the George Floyd case and several other civil rights cases, ended up taking the case. Only because of that reason do we even know about this Snoop Dogg situation. There are, what you're saying, dozens, 50, 100, who knows how many
yes.
cases exactly like this. So this idea of abundance in the grocery store, and you have your heart's content of possible options when you're shopping, not really true. You are being dictated to what you're going to get in a particular grocery store.
Yeah. And this detail I'm going to share came out after magazine production, but
Yeah.
even like this abundance notion, like this notion of abundance, even the in-store brands, which are typically seen as supposed to be for more cost-conscious shoppers, because you want to save money and whatnot. Uh, Walmart announced that it was trying to make like an organic in-house line of food. So it's like going for the top
Right.
dollar grocer or grocery. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
trying to enter a market that
Right.
Just
So
insane.
yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. Store brands are like the generic version of a
Yes.
product,
Yeah.
and they've been around for a while. I remember when I was growing up, you would just have a can with a white label on it that said beans or like tomatoes, and it was the most bare bones thing possible, and that was your store brand. The interesting thing is that a lot of those store brands are made by the same big food
Yeah.
companies. If you go to Trader Joe's and you get their vegetable chips, they're Terra vegetable chips. Like everybody knows it. They're the exact same chips. The way that these food companies deal, the reason they're doing it is that they're segmenting the market. So a generic brand that usually sells for less, and one of the reasons it sells for less is it doesn't have to pay these slotting fees,
Right.
right? Because it's part of the company. Um, uh, that's targeting a lower income segment of the market. And then the ones with a brand name where people are like, well, I need to know that this is Tostitos, or I need to know that these are Terra chips. Then that's segmented. That's designed for a higher income segment of the market. So they don't have a problem with selling the same thing in two bags because they're targeting different customers with those two things. And so that's why. But what you're saying is that now Walmart is saying, all right, we captured the low end side of the market, but now we're going to actually, we're the scorpion. We're going to go after the high end side of the market, even though the same guys are making the low end and the high end. We're going to go and try to capture that segment as well. And it's all this kind of vertical integration. You actually talk about this historically in the article by going all the way back to the early days and really the first supermarket, and that was done by the great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company, which everybody knows as the A&P. So tell me about how the A&P kind of they invented this whole idea of, well, they invented the supermarket, but they also invented this idea of vertical integration in
Yeah.
grocery.
Yeah. There's an excellent book that tells the history of A&P, and it's cited in the story. But the A&P like emerges at a time where the only thing that they were buying was literally like coffee and tea, and they were selling it in bulk across the country. But the what the innovation that A&P has is that it's just it's what's it called? The timeline is that
Mm-hmm.
um, changing like consumer preferences, and like you have these like brick and mortar stores like where you're actually buying these
Mm-hmm.
goods. Uh, but the big innovation in like food at this time, I guess, is baking powder. Like it's like a preservative kind of.
Okay.
It helps to preserve what people were eating at the time.
Right,
And
because there weren't preservatives in the food. The food was
exactly,
actually real.
exactly.
Like
Like yeah, if you
they
wanted
weren't as
bread, you had to go to the
processed.
baker, and if you
Right, they
want
weren't as
your meat,
processed, and
definitely.
so the use of baking powder to bake your own goods so that they would stay around for a little while was important, and so you needed this as part of your staple items as a family.
Yeah, and it being like that staple item, like you're gonna have this is gonna be something you're going to purchase all the time. And
Right,
the real innovation that A&P has is like, okay, why don't we just put it in our own container and put a label on it
right.
that says A&P, and that's sort of what
Right.
that's sort of
They
what
they
begins that
created the
organization.
the store brand. They created the store
Definitely.
brand. But what they also did was they actually started to make it themselves, right? So
Yeah.
they would create a producer at the producer level, so that instead of having to buy goods from other people, they would build, do it all in house. And this drove this huge growth of A&P. At the peak, this was an incredible stat from your article. At the peak, there were 15,737 A&P stores in the U.S. And this is in the 1920s, right? This is not a time where you had national logistics networks, that where you had the standardization in the same kind of way. And it really caught the eye of a lot of policymakers who said, what's going on here? We got this conglomerate, and not only are they able to produce their own stuffs, which helps muscle out competitors, but they're also saying that because we have 15,000 stores, you're going to sell to us for less. You, the suppliers of the goods that we don't make. If you want to get into A&P, you better give us this stuff for less so we can get a higher margin on it. And what did that whole thing trigger in among policymakers?
Yeah, that's if you're like in the antitrust world and read stuff on anti-monopoly, you hear about this thing called Robinson-Patman,
Right.
and or I think to know where A&P eventually gets hit is that they eventually are hit with a Sherman Antitrust Act violation for artificially keeping prices down. Like that is, I don't want to say that's a conclusion, but that is a real watershed moment for the company, and that happens in 1946. But anyways, in like the 10 to 15 years leading up to that, you have this pressure in Congress to really tame down or like really tame the buyer power of A&P across the grocery supply chain.
Right. And I think that sometimes when people hear this, they think, well, what's the problem? They're knuckling under suppliers, and that means I get my goods cheaper. And why do you have a problem with chain stores and discount stores that offers goods to consumers at a lower price? And you have to look at the other side of the equation there, right? I mean, this is a power buyer. That's a great term that you just used. That has the ability to tell suppliers and dictate to suppliers what their costs will be and what their revenue will be. And this has a monopsony effect. This is the opposite of monopoly. Monopoly is that when you have hold over consumers. Monopsony is when you have the hold over producers. And so as a buyer, a power buyer, they are harming all of these suppliers that they have and presenting them with little ability to make a profit. And this is the interesting thing because they got hit for this, as you said, in an antitrust lawsuit. And Robinson-Patman had a similar purpose to say we can't have price discrimination in the market. You can't get your goods for less than another company. And then, so tell me about how Robinson-Patman kind of falls out as a tool that gets used. But what we see is that groceries learned from the experience of the A&P, and once Robinson-Patman doesn't really exist anymore except on paper, they start engaging in the same practices.
Yeah, and I just before we get into that, the way that I conceptualize this power buyer dynamic is that as just as easily as power buyer. So in this sense, A&P could squeeze out the suppliers downstream of the supply chain that came into it. Just as easily, it can dictate where prices go for the consumer end. Like that, to me, seems like the hinge point on why this matters. But once RPA falls out of enforcement, Walmart picks up the slack where A&P left off, and Walmart is like a turbocharged version of what A&P did.
Right.
Like it is within a like, I mean, it's almost like it's like an exponential project of bigness. What's going on here? Like A&P is really the one who like carried it over throughout most of the 20th century, and then
the statistic you use is that A&P at the peak of A&P, they had 16% of the market. And there was a report about 5 years ago from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance that says in 43 different metro areas and 160 other cities, Walmart has 50% of the market. So that is more than 3 times the level of A&P, which was seen as such a behemoth that laws were made to stop what A&P was doing. And Walmart is doing it at 3 times the level now.
Yeah, this is a really funny detail. And it wasn't like directly related to the story. Found out in my reporting, I was talking to a person, and they said that the only reason they keep a Arkansas Business Journal like subscription is because
Hmm.
that's how you know what's happening with Walmart. Like that is
Right,
that you're not going to find out what's really
right.
going on with Walmart unless you know what's going on in that geographic area. But
That's interesting.
it shows how
Um,
an economy
and then
revolves around the company.
and then you see how food companies actually have to compensate for this. And for all of these things, the slotting fees, the bigness of the consolidation of the grocery industry, it's something that in my book and elsewhere I've called concentration creep. So if you have concentration on one side of a transaction, the other side realizes, well, the only way we're going to gain any leverage is by getting bigger ourselves. And so it's like it's race to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so that's what we see among these food companies. And that can also lead to such consolidation that it ends up engaging in things like price fixing. So we've seen a number of various food companies, particularly in meat and produce, where
Yeah.
you have large market shares among the top players, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, among pork, turkey, beef, chicken, all of these different forms of meat. And there are ways to leverage that into what is essentially a collusive arrangement. So there's an active lawsuit right now by the Justice Department against a company called AgriStats, which aggregates all of the information, proprietary information in a particular market, whether it's pork or turkey or chicken or whatever, and then they sell that information to everybody in the market. So imagine this: like you're a pork processor, and you now have access in a book to everybody else's costs, everybody else's prices, everybody else's supply, all of their plans for what they're going to do. They also all have your information too. And so everybody can make the same determination that, oh, it seems like I'm in fourth place in terms of my cost. I could raise that to probably, where I'm at second place, and I'm not going to lose any market share because there's still, going to be somebody who's making more, who's charging more than I am. So this is a collusive arrangement through a third party rather than just the heads of all the big meat processors going into a room and saying, let's raise prices. They just go to this AgriStats. AgriStats gets all the information for them, and then they know to raise prices.
Yeah, they don't have to navigate on what soil they're going to be meeting on. Like I'm actually reading The Informant right now, which is all about the
Mm-hmm.
ADM lysine price fixing, and
Right.
it's just so funny that this book has no idea comes what comes 15, 20 years down
Right.
the line.
That it's so much easier to do
Yeah,
this now. And obviously, in the Justice Department's eyes, it's illegal
yeah,
to do it, but they're working that case out right now. So yeah, so Walmart and these other companies, they treat their suppliers in this manner. They knuckle under. They say you have to get all your stuff to us on time, or else we're going to dock you a penalty. It's you kind of think of Walmart and these other large grocers as really efficient operations, but they're doing it through the barrel of a gun, right? Like they're saying that we're going to be efficient, or else you're going to lose basically your whole margin to us if you're not more efficient. And so they're forcing these practices on the marketplace and knuckling under these companies. And we saw this at its greatest level during the pandemic. Tell me about what happened after the pandemic in terms of Walmart and these other big box stores being able to get supplies over their independent competitors.
right. So there's a really interesting report I found that looks at a 3-year period for Walmart's like delivery requirements from suppliers. And the the main point is that beginning in 2017 or 2018, I believe that
Yeah.
75% of their orders had to come in, or like had to be delivered on time. And if they
Right.
weren't, they were subject to a penalty. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, like the margins are very, very slim in this industry. That's just how it operates. But
Yeah.
within from 2017 until like when the pandemic starts, and remember, like that's these supply chains just like get all twisted and snarled up. We jump from a 75%
Mhm.
on time rate to a 98%. Like you're practically demanding perfection in the worst supply chain crisis that we've experienced in decades.
Right.
And every single one of those sales that didn't make it, like that's a 3% hit onto the supplier. That
Right.
is the way I put it in the story is like the implication was clear: to sell to Walmart or get out of the business. Like that.
Absolutely. And that was even more true in the pandemic, where they said, look, forget logistics that where you have to get it here on time. You have to give to us before you give it to our competitors. These products, we have to get them first. There was this Federal Trade Commission review of supply chain practices by big box grocers. And it showed very specific, explicit, deliberate claims that suppliers were told, serve Walmart, serve Amazon before you serve these independent competitors. So you had all these situations where you had independent grocers with empty shelves during the pandemic. I remember seeing this, we all do. And then companies like Walmart had fully stocked shelves, and
Yeah.
Amazon online, you could get anything you wanted during the pandemic. That's because of their buyer power.
Yeah, that also reflects the thing you mentioned earlier, like concentration creep. That if your biggest buyer is of that size, you are going to bend your business to be able to sell at that scale. And if you're able to sell at that scale, you're not going to be able to sell to like your local grocery store. Like there's an example in
Right.
the story of this person who wanted to order like toilet paper, paper towel for their store, and they went to like the manufacturer, and the manufacturer, like literally the order that they wanted, or what it would cost for that, or like the pure
Right.
number of paper towel or whatever it was, would be more than they sold in the last year. Like that would have to
Right.
be
That's
minimum.
what they would have to order. So they're putting an impossible number out there just to
Right.
make sure that there's no way that they're going to order that much. There's no way they're going to be able to get that
Yeah.
toilet paper, and then they're at a disadvantage to their competitors. And this is how the consolidation
Yeah.
happens in the
So if
grocery
you're
space.
so if you're an independent grocer, guess who you if you can't buy it from the manufacturer or the supplier, guess who you go buy your toilet paper from? Go to Walmart, you go to Sam's Club,
Yeah.
you go to Costco.
Right. Right. And then you put it on your shelf, and
Yep.
people know that they're going to get it. They're going to have to pay more there because you got to make some kind of markup. So they're going to pay more there than at Sam's Club, than at Walmart, than at Costco. And that drives shoppers to go elsewhere because the independent grocers can't compete. So I want to talk about two other things here that I think are important. The first one is, and you touch on this in the story, about what is known as shrinkflation. If you're a food company, you're up against all these giants. This war going on. The story, I should say, is called War in the Aisles. If you're going up against all these giants in terms of Walmart and the other big grocers, you got to find ways to keep your margin because you're paying all these slotting fees, you're paying all these supplier fees. They're knuckling under you to say, you have to charge us less and less for these supplies. So what do you do? One example is shrinkflation. Could you tell us what shrinkflation is?
Yeah, shrinkflation, or the industry term is called price pack architecture. But essentially, what
Right.
you're doing is you are repackaging the very same goods that were in a normal bag and putting it into a smaller one. And while at the same time, despite it being in a smaller package, you are raising the price on it. And that price
Right.
it has a lot of inputs that go into it. Like I mean, I think like whether it's like the wrapping, the whatever it is. But the point
Right.
being that it's a way to squeeze more in the final sale out of a product. And
Right.
I would say like the first example I personally noticed of this would have been like the smaller cans of soda. Like instead of a 12 ounce, you see like a 7.5 or 8 ounce. I think that was probably like one of the earliest forms of like shrinkflation we've
Right.
seen. But and like the unique thing about that, like that's like okay, maybe you don't want a full can, but what's new about the shrinkflation of today is that it's so like blatant
Right.
where it makes
Right.
you feel like you're going crazy. Like I swear there was more chips in this bag 5 years
Right.
ago than there is today. It's like at least with the mini cans and the regular cans, you can still get the regular can, but if all your chip size bags shrink, like that's
Right.
you're just getting screwed on that.
Right. It's interesting. We ran a piece today about some of the solutions to this, and in France, they have a very interesting solution to the shrinkflation problem. They literally require the retailer to label packages that went down in size without going down in price. It is, I don't know if it's le shrinkflation or whatever, but they put these labels on packages and say this package used to be 10 ounces, it's now 7.5, and they didn't take the price down. So that's a pretty good deterrent for companies to not do that, right?
I mean, the other thing too is that like it is we are not like jumping the gun on talking about them making like higher margins on this. Like there are earnings calls where you have the
Yes.
executives of these like food companies saying that they're not going to call it shrinkflation. That's why they say price pack architecture is like the way to higher margins. Like this is
Right.
the roadmap. This is what we
Yeah.
need to do.
They've said it explicitly, and so that's a very good point. Okay, I want to come to the final section of this because it really gets to this fundamental change in how grocery stores view themselves almost. So it starts, way back in the 70s and 80s. There's kind of a running joke that everyone knows about the size of your receipt that you get from a grocery store. Like, CVS, they're like a foot long. That's a drugstore, but it's the same kind of principle. There was a company called Catalina Marketing. And in the 1970s and 1980s, they devised this concept where they would essentially read through the scanner what you bought, and they would generate coupons based on what you bought at that moment. So they base it on your current basket of goods. And those coupons would get attached to the receipt. That's why the receipt was so big, because you had all these coupons on there. This went higher tech, right? This evolved. And tell us about the ways it started with, loyalty cards and rewards cards or memberships, and then it went into a whole other realm. So tell us about this leveraging of consumer data.
So I mean, aside from being able to like leverage consumer data for groceries, these like discounts that are offered based upon the data that's being collected. If you're a supplier, you have to pay to be able to have that discount like applied to your food. And also
Right.
whenever there's a discount, it's not Walmart or whoever taking a hit on it. It's the supplier taking the hit
Right.
for the discount.
That's important.
Yeah. But when it comes to like the evolution of this sort of like customer data, it seems that it wasn't appreciated until very recently how much data is like collected when you go inside the grocery store, how much it reveals about a person. And for the longest time, it was grocers like sitting on it for themselves, and that's where you and you offer in order to be able to keep collecting this data, you would have to offer a reason for people to come back. And let's say that reason to get them to come back is a rewards program. Like for every $20, $50, whatever you spend, you would get this much money in
right
store.
or certain goods, if you had the card and if you use the card, would be chop a buck off it or something like that. And coupons are still out there, and people, I guess, still clip coupons, but the majority of the deals in the store are really from your rewards card. So every time you put your rewards card in, it learns everything that you just bought, which means it can put together a very detailed history of your shopping habits. And that's really, really valuable information for every company in that store, every food product in that store. Oh, Jared buys Oreos. Jared buys Minute Maid orange juice. Jared buys this particular pack of Tostitos. He buys it on Wednesdays. He doesn't really buy it on Fridays, but he does buy it on Wednesdays. We know we have this like perfect amount of information, and it's catnip for advertisers. These companies that want to know what you buy. So how do they leverage? How do groceries leverage that information?
Yeah, that it sounds crazy, you repeating it back to me, but I mean, it's sort of it's like the same trend as everything else, like on the internet. Like that's why you see ad space everywhere, and groceries or grocers see a similar opportunity for food,
Right.
for food and beverages.
So they built like actual advertising businesses now, right? It's called retail media. So what's
Right.
retail media?
Uh, it's retail media. It refers to it's kind of a buzzword inside the industry, but from my understanding, retail media is in the same way that platforms like uh, Facebook, Twitter, you name them, have a business for selling ads. That's the
Right.
same. That's the same premise that grocers
Right.
want to use with the data that they collect. And
So now
this is like,
Kroger, Albertsons,
yes,
Walmart, they have actual advertising businesses that they're charging advertisers to access the data that they've collected on you and me and everybody else. And in fact, Costco, right after the article came out, announced that they're putting a retail media business together to sell your data to advertisers.
yeah, and like to really underscore the importance of this data, like we I talk about in the story about the Kroger Albertson potential deal that's being challenged by the
The
FTC
merger,
and
yeah.
the merger, yeah, the merger. And on the one hand, if you like really if you've been following how this is developed, that there's what's called the companies have offered to divest certain assets in order to make it more
Right.
palatable to
Right.
regulators. Like, okay, we see you have concerns about our dominance in, let's say, in like Wisconsin or whatever. So we'll like offload a couple of these. Like that's just an example.
Right.
But some of the people I was talking to are like pointing out like that sort of really misses what the real play is happening here. Like
Right.
what's really happening here is that these two, like you don't, the geographic regions almost don't even matter when you consider the amount of data that they're able to collect on their customers
Mm.
already. Like you want to have finer, more granular details on who is shopping inside your stores. And the reason that Kroger and like this Kroger Albertson thing is happening is because they're trying to catch up to Walmart, and Walmart is the biggest grocer, like by far. Like
Right.
they are the center of gravity in this industry, and this
Right.
like concentration creep just keeps going because you know who has
Right.
even more advertising data than Walmart? It's Amazon. Like,
Right.
but Amazon is not winning in the grocery game just yet. So it's because of this war you have going on, this
Yeah.
big data war between Amazon and Walmart. You're seeing all these like middle level grocers
And
trying to bulk up on their data operations through.
and one of the really interesting examples that you have is this proposed merger between Walmart and Vizio. So
Yes.
Vizio makes smart TVs. I have a Vizio actually, and they have this SmartCast system where when you turn it on, it's basically a lineup of all your apps, your streaming apps, and everything, and a bunch of sort of coming attractions. But you can put ads in there too. And as you stream, you can also stream direct ads to the consumer. And if you know all these things about that particular consumer, those ads can be very targeted and very smart, and they can be done directly through your television screen in a way that it obscures what the real price of something is, right? So if you're getting an ad through your Vizio screen and it's for a Walmart product, or it's for a product that is, it's for a regular product that is infused with Walmart's consumer data about you. They know that you like Oreo cookies, so they can sell to Mondelez and say, you can put an ad in this guy's television and send him right directly. Like, if you order now, just hit this QR code, $3.99, you'll have Oreos in your house in a day, right? That's the brave new world here. And this kind of retail data, this granular level data, it really supercharges it. And if they really know that you like that, maybe one time it's $3.99, and maybe the next time it's $4.29, and maybe it just keeps going up and up and up. And you don't really know what the real price is. So like, okay, I guess the deal this week is $4.29. And those little 30-cent, 40-cent moves on hundreds of millions of people over the course of a year adds up to real money.
Yeah, and this doesn't get mentioned in the piece because it's not about TV software, but smart TV software is like not very intuitive to use either. Like I just found out last night that basically the industry norm when it comes to your smart TV is that is as soon as you connect your TV to the internet, you are giving permission to the manufacturer to just sell that information to third parties. Like that is by default. You have to go in there and like switch that off. And my TV, like the remote on it is like you are not going to be able to navigate on this little spin dial thing to stop this. And I can't imagine like that should not be like on the.
And people just don't know. I mean,
exactly.
It's people aren't informed at how data rich and how invasive all of this really is. And that is why, we did this sort of solutions piece today. That's why one of the big things is figuring out a federal data privacy law, figuring out whether you can make some restrictions on the use of data in pricing, whether you can say that this data collection is actually an unfair or deceptive practice, or some things along those lines to slow down this stuff here so that consumers actually understand what's being done to them. So that, I think, is the big frontier. And then the other frontier is around Robinson patent. So at the end of the piece, you talk about how one of the FTC commissioners, Alvaro Bedoya, has been really active in talking about reviving this kind of dormant law that is still on the books, but it's just not enforced by anybody. And in fact, what we learned just recently is that the FTC, it looks like they haven't formalized this, but it looks like they're going to file a case against an alcohol company for engaging in these practices of giving better deals to certain big box stores and knuckling under other suppliers and also the independent stores.
Yeah, I mean that's what's on the horizon. I mean it's from what I was like from the people I was talking to, I got the understanding that inside these agencies, like there's this narrative of what happened to Robinson patent enforcement, and now it's about recalibrating the expertise to actually bring a case forward on it. Because like if you're tuned into these debates enough, like critics try to turn RPA into they try to turn it into like a joke of a law that like this actually increases prices for consumers. But so it's like, well, okay, which is going to be the first case that really that this is tested on, and maybe after that we'll see what other sectors of the food business faces.
Great. Well, it's a great piece. We've broken it down about as much as you possibly can. It's called War in the Aisles. It is at part of our special series on pricing. It's at prospect.org/pricing. You can find all the stories that we did on all facets of this. And what I love about this particular one is that it incorporates all of these different things. I mean, we didn't even get into surge pricing and electronic shelf tags and things like that. But, there's surge pricing, there's price fixing, there's power buying, there's, personalization through retail media plays. There's just about everything is happening in the grocery store. It's happening at a sub rosa level that you don't normally hear enough about. And so it was great for you to sort of excavate all this and bring it to the surface so that people understand what's happening. So thank you for that, Jared. In a couple minutes we have left, I know you're no longer with the Prospect. We're very sad about that, but you are at the Capital Forum, which is an investigative news site, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of your work in the last couple months has been on healthcare and healthcare related issues. So could you just tell us about some of the things you've been doing over at the forum?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I cover healthcare, antitrust, legal issues, and or I mean, it's been a really, really big uh, year for healthcare. I think I would say that earlier this year, there was like a reported investigation into United Health Group, like a monopolization investigation, and this is being like spearheaded by the DOJ. And this would, or let me take a couple steps back. I
Okay.
think unless you really follow like what's going on in healthcare, it's really hard to wrap your head around how we were just talking about food and how concentrated it is. Like healthcare, I would say, is like magnitudes worse than this. Like
Right.
you, it that's so like what I do like on a day-to-day basis is finding out which like remaining third parties that haven't been swallowed up by one of these huge incumbents, and how are they like slowly being squeezed out of the market, directly whether it's directly from one of these large insurer vertically integrated behemoths pushing them out, or if it's through one of these like behemoth like vertically integrated behemoths manipulating existing regulation around healthcare, because healthcare is so regulated. But
Right.
we are kind of just waiting on a lot of rumors that we're hearing from FTC and DOJ about some investigations that are supposed to officially be announced in the coming months. And once, if those like ever see the light of day, there's a lot for us to write about.
Right. Well, we'll be waiting to check it out. It's capitalforum.com. It is a subscription-based service, but they do great information. If you follow them on Twitter at the Capital Forum, or you follow Jared on Twitter at Doraj Facundo.
It's my first name backwards.
That is, yes, indeed. Then you can find out about all that. Well, that about wraps it up for the Roundup this week. Jared, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And thanks for this story.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on and bringing me on to write for this issue. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll be back next week, same time, 12:30 Eastern, with another edition of the Roundup. But have a great weekend, everybody, and a great rest of your day. All right, bye.